And now
Great, there you go. I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves unless you're talking. And Ben, you can start saying whatever you want anytime.
Okay. Good evening, everyone out there in Zoom land. My name is Ben Tucker, and I'm your MC for the evening. I'm a Bay Area storyteller and a SAC board member. And this evening, I want to welcome you to the Genre Storytelling Series brought to you by SAC, the Storytelling Association of California. On the third Wednesday of each month, 7 storytellers from SAC-affiliated swap groups come together to share stories. Today's genre series theme is urban and historical stories. And our first storyteller, all the way from Texas, is Tim Tingle. Tim is a Choctaw and the author, an Oklahoma Choctaw, and the author of 20 books with yet more to come. He's been telling Choctaw stories for most of his life across the US and Europe, and soon to come, Ireland, his favorite stomping grounds. So sit back and relax, and let's hear from Tim.
Yakoke, thank you. And Choctaw, I'm very honored to be here. And I know I said that Ireland is my favorite stomping grounds, but in case there are any Choctaws listening, of course, Choctaw Nation is my truly favorite stomping grounds. But we have a close relationship with the Irish going all the way back to the famine days when the Choctaws sent money, when the British and the American government wouldn't send a dime, but the Choctaw Nation, only a few years after the Trail of Tears, gathered together money and sent it to Ireland. And we've been friendship nations ever since. I'd like to start out by singing our friendship chant. It's a Choctaw chant, and it's to build the bridge and the friendship among the storytellers and the audience both. Way ho hana hey ya, hey lo hey ya, hey ya. Way ho hana yeah ya, hey lo hey ya, hey ya. Way ho hana hey ya, hey lo hey ya, hey ya. Way ho, way yo. Long ago in the land of the Choctaws lived a young man called Lone Hunter. He was called this because Lone Hunter always went out into the swamps and the woods and hunted alone, even though the elders from the time the children were young would gather them together and tell them ways of survival and to show respect. And one of the main rules was never go into the swamp, never go into the woods, never go hunting alone, never. But Lone Hunter, he was so proud. He had cut down his river cane and hollowed it out and made his blow dart gun. And with stickers from poisonous plants, he made poisonous darts. And he would rise up early in the morning. And after the breakfast meal with his family, he would grab a little leather pouch full of poisonous darts and his blow dart gun and make his way out into the swamp alone. And he was proud. Whenever he would see a deer go by, he would usually wait until he knew the deer would be one of the largest deers for several days to pass close to the town. And he was so good, he could sink that poisonous dart right into the vein that would cause the deer to plop over and die. And he wouldn't carry the deer back to his backyard and cut it up and boil the water and invite everyone over to enjoy the cooked deer. That came later. First, No Name would toss the deer over his shoulder and drag it through the center of town so everyone could see how large the buck he had killed was. He was so proud. And then there came the time where No Name was out and the buck dashed by, and then he saw the biggest buck he'd ever seen in his life. And he lifted up the blow dart gun and he said, "That's why the first one ran away. This is a day. This is a day of spirit signings." And he watched the dart spin and spin and spin, and he saw it just as he knew it would, right at that place of the thick vein on the buck's neck. And he dashed, dodging the trees and crawling over the swampy brush. He expected to see the buck there, but the buck was not there. And he thought, what could have gone wrong? I saw the dart pierce the neck. And then he saw, lying on the ground in front of him, the largest bumblebee he'd ever seen in his life. And the poisoned dart had stuck into the bumblebee. And he said, what are the chances that that a bumblebee would be flying at exactly the moment when what is this? And so he picked up his blow dart gun and made his way deeper into the woods. And the night began to come, and he had seen no more bucks. So he built a small campfire. He had decided there was no way he could humiliate himself by going back without a buck. It would insult his pride. And so he pulled out the blanket he carried over his shoulders, and when the fire was gone down, he pulled the blanket up and was just about to sleep when he thought he heard something. And he looked up and he thought he saw a skeleton. What was this? And then there was a face of a person, and they grabbed the blanket and wrapped it over their shoulder and started running. And Lone Hunter, he jumped up and he started chasing after them. And they came finally to the cliff. And I know in the Mississippi swamps, it's almost impossible to imagine a cliff, but I have been to such a place in Choctaw, Mississippi. And he ran to the edge of the cliff and he jumped out and tried to grab the blanket. And he did. He grabbed the blanket, but the young man fell over the cliff. And he watched him and he heard him cry out. And he saw him fall hundreds of feet. And when he landed on the stones below, just before he landed, suddenly he was a skeleton. And the bones broke. And he saw them. He stepped back and he wrapped the blanket around himself. And he made his way home. It was a long trip home. And when he walked down the street and people saw he had no deer, they closed the doors and walked inside. And the elders of the town, they knew that something had happened, and they gathered together and they invited Lone Hunter. They invited him. And when Lone Hunter came, one of the elders said, "We know that you have been violating the rules. You have shown the elders disrespect, but the biggest disrespect has happened to you. Explain to us the last few days." And when Lone Hunter told them everything that had happened, one of the elders bowed and raised his hand, and he said, "The one who died long ago. For he was one like you who ignored the elders, and he went deep into the swamps and the woods all by himself. And when you saw what had happened to him, it was his gift to you, so you would learn to listen to the wisdom of the elders and never go off alone." And Lone Hunter, for the first time, he showed so much respect to the elders, and he said, Yakoke, thank you. Thank you, I promise. And he made friends, and he would go hunting with 2 or 3. And one day there was a young boy who had so much difficulty hitting anything. And Lone Hunter said, look, there's a buck there. And the young boy was on one side of the tree, and Lone Hunter was on the other side. And he blew his dart and killed the buck and told everyone the young boy had done it. And he became the teacher then. He became the teacher. But he never forgot. There were times when he would make himself, always with a friend, all the way to the cliff and look down and send a prayer on the one who had taught him the lesson of learning from the elders. Yakoke, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, for that wonderful, legendary traditional tale and exposing us to some great information on the Choctaw Nation. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us from Texas as well. Appreciate you.
I am honored. Thank you.
All right. And now our next storyteller is Aunt Lee Ann. Lee Ann is a professional storyteller, actor, and teaching artist. She's been performing for over 30 years. She coaches storytellers privately, as well as teaching a live stream course through Mira Costa College in Oceanside. She is a state liaison for NSF. She's a YES board member and a founding secretary for the Storytellers of San Diego. Aunt Lee is also the winner of the 2020 NSN first ever virtual storytelling slam. So joining us from the San Diego Storytellers group is Lee Ann. Take it away, Lee Ann.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Late last night when we were all in bed, old Mrs. O'Leary took a lantern from the shed. Cow kicked it over and winked her eye and said, there'll be a hot time in the old town tonight. Mary couldn't believe her ears. Her boys were singing that song. If they had been there like she had been there. Outside of her dress shop, she'd been sleeping in the back. And when the fire came to her block in Chicago, they all started to run. She would never forget that sound, that smell, the heat. The people were running. 300 people died that day. They would never sing it for revels if they had been there. And Mary, she had seen a lot of awful things before and since then. Born in Ireland, Mary lived on a tenant farm. When she was about 8 or 9 years old, she said to her da, why do we work and work and work? And the landlord's the one who gets all the good crops. We barely get enough to eat. And her da said, well, you're the smart one, Mary. That's why we're trying all we can to get over to America. And when the potato blight came, they didn't know that the Choctaw would help. They just got on to that boat and went all the way to New York City. Mary and her family, they wandered around a bit, settled up in Ontario, Canada, outside of Toronto. They were able to work the land there. But Mary's da, he said, you're the smart one, Mary. You stay in school. You could be the first one in all of our family to graduate high school. Ma said, and you better have a trade. Keep sewing. And by the time that she graduated high school, she could sew and design dresses. Da said, keep going. And she went to Teachers College, Toronto Normal School. She learned how to teach, and when she was done with her training, Ma said she'd been given a wandering foot. She went down to Michigan and taught there, and it was depressing. So she started going to Kentucky and Pennsylvania and traveling all around Chicago. Eventually, she found her way down to Memphis, and what she found there was George. Now, George was a beautiful, big man, and he thought that this educated, smart, feisty little, barely 5 feet Irish girl was something else. They got married. George had a union job, so he could afford for them to have Mary stay at home when they started their family. And boom, 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 in Memphis, they had 5 little kids in 5 years. But then the awful came to Memphis, yellow fever. George and Mary watched those little children die, her son, both her daughters, and the baby who didn't even have a name yet. George and Mary buried their children, and then the yellow fever took George as well. Mary let her wandering foot take her back to Chicago. She set up her dress shop. She was quiet for about 10 years till the awful fire came. And then she started hanging around in union halls. There was a new organization called the Knights of Labor. And they hired Mary to be a community organizer, childless widow. She dressed all in black. She made herself an antique dress. And since her hair was already going gray at 40, she started lying about her age, upwards. She called all the men, all the workers, no matter what their age, her boys. And they all called her Mother, Mother Jones. Mother Jones. There was one time that she pretended to be a mother in truth. She was working for the Knights of Labor, and she went undercover to a mill. She told that mill boss that she had 6 little children she was going to be bringing with her in a couple of weeks. And the mill bosses, they just about slavered for children. They liked paying women because it was hardly anything compared to the men, but oh, they loved to play the pittance that they paid those children and got all that work out of them. 6 kids. He found her a place to live. Mary couldn't believe it. The front step had holes in it. The door was off its hinges. The windows had gaps she could put her fist through, and the roof was leaking. Isn't there anywhere else? There's 20 people behind you who want this house. You'll be glad of it soon enough. And then he caught on that she wasn't bringing the children. She was organizing them. But for the rest of her life, Mother Jones said those children in that mill haunted her. They would breathe in the dust and the lint till their lungs could barely function. They hardly had enough to eat, and they were missing thumbs and hands, fingers from reaching up in the machinery to do their jobs. They never even played like little children should. She felt the same about the miners. When the United Mine Workers hired her, she went all over Pennsylvania, Kentucky. She organized a group of women when there was a big strike down in the holler, down for the underground workers. She organized the women to beat off the scabs with brooms and mops. She got quite the reputation. But when there were 75,000 miners on strike, and she estimated about 10,000 of those were little boys, even though the labor laws said they couldn't work the children, she got a big band together and she marched children and women from Philadelphia to President Teddy Roosevelt's New York private residence. He called her, at 83 years old now, the most dangerous woman in America. And she went about trying to prove it. There was a strike in Colorado. The miners were on strike, and the governor had promised he wouldn't send in the militia. They had passed a law for the 8-hour day, but they couldn't enforce it because Rockefeller had the militia in his pocket. Well, she was in a union hall when the word came that the militia had been sent in and the governor had lied. Well, Mary, Mother Jones, she stood up and she said, Let's go get those sons of bitches. Mary swore a lot. She said, that's how poor people pray. It gets faster results. And she ran out of that union hall. Sure, there were people behind her, but not one person followed her, and she confronted that militia all by herself at 83. And that, my friends, is the legend of Mother Jones, whose motto was, pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leanne, for that wonderful story. You know, I used to subscribe to Mother Jones magazine and I knew something about it, but now I really know a full story of Mother Jones thanks to you. So again, thank you for that historical perspective on an extraordinary woman.
Thanks for the chance, Ben. I appreciate it.
Okay, so now we will segue over to our next storyteller, Mike Thompson. Mike.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Well, let me give you a little intro first, Mike. Mike captivates his audience with his life stories and indigenous lore. He was raised in an oral island tradition. He remembers histories carved in the rafters, shared in the light fire. Mike understands the power of words have to shape our perspectives and our experiences. In his navigation, he is taught how our stories pull everything in the world to us. Mike invites us to travel in our imagination, knowing that whatever we can imagine, we can have. He also reminds us that stories nourish our soul. So let's journey with him to faraway and near places, past and present. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Ben. The people on the Yap Island, long, long ago, lived in an island paradise. Their world was abundant. The ocean, the sky, the land gave them everything they needed, and they lived a bountiful life. Now, one thing's almost ironic that happens when people have such abundance is sometimes they also have fear. They have fear that maybe too much is not going to be enough, and that they're going to need to amass more wealth, and they're going to need to protect it. And out of that fear, they decided they needed to invent money. Now, they tried many things. They tried peppercorns, they tried shells, they tried coconuts. Nothing really seemed to be the store of wealth that they were looking for. And on top of it, it created strife. It created arguments. It created fighting, created stealing. Now, their chief was a loving, caring, compassionate man. So this, of course, made his heart very heavy to see his people experiencing that discord. And he walked down to the beach one night, beautiful full moon. He looked up at that moon, his heart so heavy as he thought, why? Why are people fighting about money? We don't even need this money, and people are fighting over it. Wouldn't it be nice if there were a money that were like the moon, that we could all appreciate, that we could all enjoy, that we could all share? No one tries to hide the moon under their sleeping mats. No one puts the moon in the jungle and tries to cover it with leaves. The moon's there for everyone to enjoy, and it belongs to all of us. These were his thoughts as he fell over and went to sleep. Sleeping there in the warm sand, he was hoping to dream, because often that's where the best answers come from, is from our dreams. And as expected, he had a dream. He woke in the morning, he called his people together, he said, come, most magnificent thing. He says, I had a dream last night. If we will sail our canoes south, we will find islands that we've never visited. We will find islands and our money is waiting there for us. All we have to do is go and pick it up. Well, the people believed in dreams also. They believed in the power of the chief. They believed in the power of vision. So they loaded men into canoes and they sent them south. It was a challenging journey. They had never made this journey before. And when we're going on a journey of discovery, it's always fraught with challenges. But after a time, the canoes arrived at the Palau Islands. Now, the Palau Islanders were not aware that there were islands north of them. They didn't know that there were Yappies there. Palau Islanders are very territorial. And they said, how do we keep these people back? Let's fight with them. They began fighting with the Yappies and they were able to repulse them and to turn them back. The Yappies men went back. The journey was a little bit easier this time because they now knew the way. And if, as long as you have an island that you can cast out your silver cord to and pull yourself in, makes it easier to make that journey. And they reported back to the chief. They said, we found the islands in your dream, but we haven't seen the money yet. But we know that the money is there. And the reason we know the money is there there are people there. Those people are fighting fiercely. They would only fight that fiercely if they were protecting something precious. So we know they have our money. Well, the chief and the people agreed. If they've got our money, we've got to go get it. So they loaded more canoes with more men, and this time even warriors. They sent them back to the Palau Islands. The Palauans again were wondering, why have you come here? Wanting to push them back. There were many battles, many losers, no winners. After a time, exhausted with fighting, they decided, let's talk. As they talked, the Palauans asked, why have you come to our islands? Who are you? What do you want? The Yappies said, we have come for our money. You're hiding our money. Palauan says, no, we don't know what you're talking about. The Yappies said, yes, our money. And they described it, big, round, beautiful, looked like the moon. Palauan said, it's not here. We don't have it. We know our islands. The Yappies said, well, we know that it's here because our chief saw it in a dream. The Palauans respected the power of a dream too. And they said, here's the deal we will make with you. You can search all over our islands. Look wherever you want. And if you find your money, we didn't even know it was there. So you know it's not ours. It must be yours. If you find it, you can take it home. The Yappies men traveled all over the Palau Islands looking for this money, and they were getting frustrated. About to leave, they knew that tomorrow they were going to go back and have to report their failure. But as is often the case, we find things in the same place. We always find them in the last place we look. Sure enough, one of the Yappies men had climbed to the top of a mountain, and he had looked down from the top of the mountain into a cave. And there, in the moist interior of the cave, there was a limestone floor. Because it had gotten late, the moon was shining down. The man saw the moon reflected in the floor of the cave, and he called out to his friends. He called, "Bring the tools, bring the stones and the shells and all of our cutting tools. I have found our money. It's hidden in the rock in the bottom of the cave, and all we have to do is cut away the parts of rock that are not money, and our money will be free." They worked hard. They queried lots of money. They began taking it back, a difficult, dangerous task, hundreds of miles over open ocean in canoes and rafts. They got back. There was huge celebration. celebration for the dream fulfilled, the promise fulfilled. And I will tell you that to this day, in the Yap Islands, there are streets lined with huge discs, some of them 12-foot in diameter, the Yapese money. And in Palau, if you go down to the little rock islands and you go into the caves, you'll see the quarries where the money was made. And we know that this story is true because I've read it in the carvings in both Palau and in Yap. And it's a tribute to those people who didn't know each other, but were able to build new bonds of friendship and cooperation because they were willing to stop fighting, to listen to each other, and to trust in the dream.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, for that profound, sacred story. Thank you for sharing that. It was really, really very, very wise and moving story. Boy, these are some great legends that we're hearing from. So moving right along, our next storyteller is Alicia Retes. Alicia is a captivating storyteller and visual arts performer of original and interactive indigenous stories for all ages. She thrives on exploring tricksters, shapeshifter stories like those of coyote, raven, rabbit, and frog. In her expressive telling, they become interesting, funny characters who embody a range of human emotions and reactions while providing an opportunity to transform preconceived ideas and unite audiences in laughter. She is a former educator and director for the Museum of the American Indian in Novato, California. Alicia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Coast Miwok people, whose territory is all of Marin County and southern Sonoma. They're still here, and you can learn more about them at coastmiwokofmarin.org. Out of respect to them, I greet you in their language. Greetings to all my relatives. My indigenous roots are with the Yoremi, commonly known as Mayo, and the Yoemi, commonly known as Yaqui. So in Yaqui, we would say, Leo Sincham Anubu, Inepo Alicia. May Creator help you. I am Alicia. This is a Two Bear Stories that originates with the Miwok people. Miwok is a Southern Sierra word that means people or humans. Southern Sierra Miwoks are one of 7 who have traditional ties to Ahwahnee, now known as Yosemite. To introduce my characters, I have a little call and response song. You're welcome to unmute and sing along if you can catch the tune. If not, even when I finish the song, just say, oh, as we traditionally do with the Miwok people. Uhumati, mama grizzly bear. Uhumati, mama grizzly bear. Tachi, itihu, older brother, young brother too. Tachi, itihu, older brother, young brother too. Tutokana, measuring worm. Tutokana, measuring worm. Oh! In the before time, before humans, in the land of Ahwahnee, the first residents were the animal people, part human and part animal. One day during the season of the ripe berries, the people were out and about doing their daily activities, building cedar wood houses, weaving baskets, fishing, collecting wood, and always giving thanks for the rich abundance in their valley through their songs and dances. Now, on this day, Mama grizzly bear, Uhumati, was fishing down at the Wakala, now known as the Merced River. She had told her children to stay with the other children and adults in the big grassy valley where they were playing games. Now, Tachi and Itihu loved each other and they always stayed together. Now, their favorite game was old school lacrosse, a basket made in the shape of a tennis racket, a buckskin ball. Now, you hit the ball and it goes through two willow posts. Well, Tachi was really, really strong. And when he struck the ball, it left the valley and rolled all the way to the river. So they needed to go retrieve the ball. And they did. Now, by the time they got to the river, they were hot, thirsty, and hungry. First thing they did was jump into the river and they splashed and played about, and cooled off, getting out of the water, shaking their fur off. Ooh, they caught the scent of ripe, sweet berries, and they followed that scent further down the riverbank. They found those berries and they ate their fill of them, their nose turning purple, paws turning purple too. Well, by this time, they were simply exhausted. They found a nice, flat, smooth boulder, very wide, and crawled upon it to sleep. Older brother put the buckskin ball beneath his head. Younger brother put his head on his brother's belly. They fell into a very deep, deep sleep. Unbeknownst to them, that rock began to slowly rise and rise for several days. You see, Mother Earth and the rock people were still shaping and shifting the grounds. That rock kept going higher and higher, nearly 1,000 feet, until it came to the blue sky where the puffy white clouds cover it like whipped cream. And the boys, they slept through the whole thing for several days. Well, when Mama Bear came back to the village with her basket of fish, she couldn't find her boys and she started to ask around. And she looked everywhere you could think of where bears might be, in hollow tubes of logs, up in trees, and the places where they pick the best berries and bulbs too. As she went along, she met many of her friends. She met a mountain lion who was using pine pitch to strengthen his bow by gluing in sinew. And Mama Bear said to Mountain Lion, "Hey, have you seen my cubs?" "No, I'll help you look for them." And so they began to look. And then they came upon Badger, the Urwik. And Badger was busy. He was working on a cedar house, making sure it was cone shaped and checking it all out. Mama Bear came up to Badger and said, hey, have you seen my bear cubs?" And Badger was intense with his work and said, no, I haven't. But I'll help you look for them. And off they went. And then they came upon Mama Deer. Now, she was working with her children who were practicing their dance move, moving their antlers in time with a cool prance. And Mama Bear said, hey, have you seen my bears?" And Mama Deer said, no, I'll help you look for them. And so the posse was getting bigger and bigger. And then they came upon Skunk, Pissick Skunk. And Skunk was working with a mortar and pestle with some real special herbs, trying to make a sweet perfume, working and working. And Mama Bear said, hey, Skunk, have you seen my bears?" And Skunk said, no, well, I'll help you look for them. And off they went. And then little white-footed mouse, Pulsina, had climbed up Mother Bear, popped on her shoulder and said, I helped you. And off they went. They looked everywhere, couldn't find the boys, until Raven came along and said, I've seen your bears high on a rock mountain. Follow me. And so they did. They followed until they came to an immense rock wall. Oh, they stood there in awe of it. Well, right away, Raven flew up to try and go get the boys. But when he got to the top, those winds were, they were so fierce, he couldn't get up to the boys. He came back down. And then Mama Bear and Mountain Lion together, they stood back and they ran and they leaped up and tried to get their paws onto the rock, but there was nothing to cling to. And they came down scratching that rock. To this day, you can see those scratch marks at the bottom of the rock. Well, Deer tried, and little white-footed mouse, Pusuna, she tried too. She hopped on like 5 stones. Her heart raced, and she fainted. Badger caught her and set her down, and I better try myself. And so he climbed up, got a little bit further, but he got afraid, and he said, I'm a builder, not a climber. This is not for me. He came back down. Mama Bear's gone, who's going to help me? Who's going to find our bears? I don't know. Then they heard a little tiny voice. I can do it. I will do it. And everybody's looking around. Where's? It was Measuring Worm. Tuck, and with her little silky thread dangling on a branch, just sort of swinging back and forth. And all the animals started to crack up. Measuring Worm, what do you think you could do that the rest of us weren't able to do? You'll never do. It's too small, too small. Mama Bear went to little Measuring Worm and said, I welcome your help. Inchie, I call him Inchie, got on Mama Bear's paw, and she placed him onto the rock. Now, Measuring Worm has 4 legs, 4 black short legs in the back, and use those as an anchor on the wall, and 6 legs that he extends out. So like an arch, he was able to start climbing. Now, when you're doing activities like this, you need to have some really powerful medicine song. And so he sang this song, Tuck, 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 Tuck. And he was climbing, he was going, and he was leaving some thread, sticky thread behind him to make the trail so they could bring the boys back down. Tuck. Took him several days, and he got about 20 feet. He kept going. He got up nearly to the top, and those winds were blowing strong again, and he got all crooked and cattywampus, and he looked down, and he got so scared. His friends just looked like a little blurry blob, and the Merced River, Wakala, it looked like a silver ribbon. Treetops looked like bottle scrubber twigs. I don't know. He straightened himself back out. He gave his word he could get those bears. And he started his chant, and this time he propelled himself really quickly. He got up to the top, scooted over to the boys, and whispered into their ears, "Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. He didn't want to wake them up too soon or startle them. And when they see where they were, they woke up. It was good. It was a good sleep. Look how low the clouds are today. Wow. Measuring Worm went up and said, no. Don't be afraid. No, don't be afraid. The boys were afraid. Listen. Surely the children of Mother Grizzly Bear have courage. Well, yeah, we do. Let's go. Little Inchie brought them all the way back down, following his little trail. And when he got to the base, the brother, nobody could see Inchie coming down, but they sure saw those boys. They went, yay, E.T., Dachi. Mama Bear gave him a big hug. Oh, boys. Next time, stay with the children in the meadow. I love you. Now, when Measuring got back down, everyone bowed to them saying, thank you. We're so sorry of what we said. We were wrong. You were so clever and courageous. Why, they decided to name that wall of rock after the little measuring room. They called it Tu Takanula, measuring room stone. Later, some newcomers came and they named it El Capitan. Story done.
Thank you so much for that
Oh,
wonderful story,
thank
and
you.
thank you for taking us into the animal kingdom with your wonderful
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
interpretations of those voices were just right on. And now we know
Excellent.
how El Capitan came into being. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for having me. Truly an honor. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, we are really on a roll here. So we're going to keep it rolling here with these great stories. Our next teller is David Tarvin. Now, David is a retired public servant who fell into storytelling quite by accident, like so many of us. He thoroughly enjoys it and loves to perform at various events. Most of his stories are original interpretations of historical events or reinterpretations of traditional fables. He likes telling to audiences in senior citizen homes and various facilities. He typically tells tall tales, historical fiction, first-person stories, folk tales, and fairy tales. Welcome, David.
Thank you. I am glad to be here. What great stories. Everybody's got such great stories tonight. So mine begins like this. Old Man Bill. Old Man Bill was a favorite of mine. He lived in my neighborhood when I was a kid in Rockland, California in the early 1970s. He lived about 3 blocks from my house in this tiny, tiny old house. It was a 3-room house, had one huge big room, a little tiny bathroom, a little tiny kitchen. And in that big room, shoved way into a corner was a little tiny cot that he slept on. And the rest of the room was filled, and I mean filled, with bookshelves, like in the library, floor to ceiling. It was just filled with books. And Old Man Bill, he loved to tell stories. And so I would hang out there and he would tell me all these stories about the olden days and his jobs and his friends and his acquaintances. And he had one favorite person that he would tell stories about, China Hank. Now, China Hank was an immigrant, and he had come over with his father when he was 10 years old in the early 1860s and settled in San Francisco. He had died in the early 50s. And Bill and China Hank had worked together in Roseville, California in the train yards. And so this was one of Bill's favorite stories. It's titled The Legend of China Hank. And I tell it to you now as it was told to me. On July 23rd, 1878, China Hank rose with the sun, as he always did. He worked on a cattle drive. He was an assistant to the cook. And so he had to be up before everybody else and start to prep the food with the cook so that the cowboys could have breakfast before they rode out to take care of the herd. Now they were on the Goodnight Loving Trail that starts in Texas and goes all the way up to Denver, Colorado. And on this one particular morning, he went over and he started his work. He made the coffee. He started the biscuits. He put them into the Dutch oven and put it on the fire. And then he noticed that the cook wasn't around. The cook's name, actually, it's kind of funny. His name was Cookie. Nobody actually really knew his name. They just called him Cookie. He'd been around forever. Well, he started looking around. He found Cookie on the other side of the chuck wagon, wrapped up in his blanket, sleeping away. So he reached down and he shook him. And when he did, Cookie rolled over one way and a whiskey bottle rolled out the other way. It was that bumblebee whiskey, and that has a sting that'll last for days. Well, he was kind of standing there. Cookie wasn't going to wake up. And all of a sudden, he felt a presence right behind him. He turned and looked, and he was facing Diablo Dan White. Now, Diablo Dan White was the ramrod. That's the foreman for the cowboys working that drive. And he stood there and started yelling at China Hank, said, "Get that cook up." Well, he wasn't going to wake up. When Dan realized that, he turned to Hank and he told him, "You make breakfast." Now, Dan was pretty intimidating. He stood about 6'2". He had flaming red hair stuffed underneath that cowboy hat and a scraggly, long red beard. He did not like the Chinese. Dan turned and he walked off, and Hank stood there. He started to shake and to shiver. He started having flashbacks back to the previous year. It was exactly 1 year, actually, in San Francisco, the first night of the hooligan riots. There was a huge meeting at the soon-to-be City Hall in San Francisco, and people were upset about the depression that was happening in the city, and they were blaming the Chinese. And so a small group started down Leavenworth, and when they got to the corner of Leavenworth and Geary, they stopped. There was a 2-story building there with a Chinese laundry in the basement. They went in, they destroyed the laundry, and they beat up all the employees, including China Hank. China Hank, he'd had enough. He just started drifting and moving east. When he wound up in Texas, he met Mr. Goodnight, and Mr. Goodnight hired him to be the cook's assistant. And that's how he wound up there. Well, China Hank stood there looking at that cook, watching Dan walk away and becoming more and more frightened. He didn't know what he was going to fix. So he walked over to that chuck wagon and he looked at what kind of the supplies that were there, and they were pretty meager by our standards. But by their standards, they were pretty lucky. They had come across a farm not just a couple of days before, so they had some fresh vegetables and one of the most wonderful rarities, eggs. Well, China Hank remembered his mom back in China, and he started chopping up that ham and chopping up the onions and the bell pepper, and he scrambled those eggs, and he threw all that stuff except for the eggs into a Dutch oven. He sauteed them, then he plopped the eggs in there, popped down the lid, and away it was cooking. Well, pretty soon, all those cowboys started to line up. And China Hank took the lid off of those eggs and started slicing it up. And then he took those biscuits, cut them in half. As each cowboy came up, they got a cup of coffee and they got a biscuit with a slice of that egg in the biscuit. Now, Diablo Dan was the first. And when he walked up, he didn't look very happy. He took that biscuit and he was squinting at his eyes at Hank, and then he bit it, and then he chewed it, and then he smiled, nodded his head at Hank, and he turned around and walked off, and every cowboy came up and they got their biscuit and their coffee and they walked off. The last cowboy, he picked up his, he bit it, and he asked Hank, he said, "What is this?" And Hank didn't know what to call it. So he said, "It's a saddle witch." Well, from that day forward, wherever those cowboys went, they asked for a saddle witch for breakfast. They just loved it. And cowboys did what cowboys do. They went from cattle drive to cattle drive, and they would ask for a saddle witch. And at the end of the drive, when they were in Denver and they were staying in a hotel or they went to a restaurant for breakfast, they would ask for the saddle witch. Well, pretty soon it was pretty darn popular. And the restaurants, they weren't quite sure how to fix it. So the cowboys just told them what was in it and they made it, but without the biscuit, because in the towns, everybody used bread. Easier to use a slice of bread than a biscuit. And so that's how it was served. And so one day there was a banker, and every day he would watch these cowboys come in and ask for a saddle witch. So he asked the waiter, he said, "What is it that those cowboys are eating?" So the waiter told him, "It's eggs, ham, diced up, bell pepper, and onion diced up. It's called a saddle witch. It's between two pieces of bread." The banker said, "I'll have that for breakfast, but put the toast off to the side." And that's how the Denver omelet was born. And that is the legend and the legacy of China Hank that goes on today, every day in restaurants all around America. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. That was a great story, Dave, and it's also made me very, very hungry. It also sounds like an egg McMuffin to me. Wow, beautiful, beautiful legend and how we came to our sandwiches in America. All right, our next storyteller is Hiba Hamdan. Hiba is a proud founding member of the Story Masters Club alongside her amazing mentor, Tina Tomiyama. Hiba was born in Lebanon. She moved to Montreal and began a career in the airlines industry. Then she moved to Los Angeles with the same company that she used to work for. And in 2015, Hiba moved with her husband to Santa Barbara, where she now works in media and TV programming, a completely new field for her. And as she says, she's still learning. She is representing the Story Masters Club, and Hiba will be sharing today a legend story titled Alicia, the Queen of Carthage.
Thank you, Ben. It was a dark, moonless night when a fleet of ships sailed from the Tyre port. The city of Tyre was in the south of the Phoenicians' land across the Mediterranean. And that fleet of ships sailed quietly. In one of these ships, little Henny suddenly woke up. He looked around, so many people he didn't know, few he knew, and looked to his mom just beside him and asked, "Mama, where are we going? Why are we sailing at night? Where is Papa?" His mom said, "Sit quiet, baby. We are sailing to Cyprus and we will meet your dad there." What happened was days earlier in the city of Tyre, which was one of the three main ports in that Phoenician land, which is now called Lebanon. The king of Tyre passed away suddenly. He had left his two children, his very beautiful daughter, Elissa, and his son, Pygmalion, as his two heirs to inherit that kingdom. But Alyssa's brother Pygmalion wanted all for him. He wanted the power and the money and all just for him, even though he was younger than his sister. So on the day his father died, he brought so many guards he had paid and declared himself as king. Alyssa and her husband Archabas, who was the main priest of Melgard in Tyre and the second in command in the city, just right hand to the king at the time. They wanted to just stop Pygmalion and take over the kingdom just peacefully. But Pygmalion, with some of his followers, murdered Archabas, Alyssa's husband. It took her a few days to calm down and gather herself, but she planned on fleeing Tyre to another land. She couldn't say so to her brother because he could have killed her too. So, under the pretext of moving from her palace to her brother's, she said, I'm gonna bring all my belongings and Archabas' treasures, all his hidden treasures, and put them in service for you, my brother Pygmalion. And Pygmalion agreed. He sent few of his companions to help her in that move. She said, I would like to just make an offering to the spirit of Archabas, and I would like just to throw in the sea some of his belongings. Some of the gold, that will be the offering to the gods and to Archabas' spirit. And she did. But in those bags, there wasn't any gold. These were bags of sand that they threw to the sea. The bags of gold went into these ships that sailed away at night from the port of Tyre. They stopped in Cyprus, in the island of Cyprus, which is like about 200 miles away from the shores of Tyre. Over there, they spent few days, and they convinced 80 young women to keep sailing with them so that they would be the wives of the majority of men who were part of that fleet of sailors. They went in the Mediterranean, not knowing exactly where they would land, until they found a beautiful land in the northwest of Africa, which is today Tunisia. They landed there, and that area was under the reign of the barbarians. King Irbas was in charge of that particular area where they landed. And Alyssa asked to buy a small bit of land. She said, just on that hill overseeing the Mediterranean, it's just the size of an ox hide. This is the skin of a bull that they use sometimes to cover themselves or as a rag. And she offered a substantial amount of money, a wealth. The locals thought she was crazy. But King Iarbas agreed, and they landed and started to build and plant in that land. King Iarbas didn't see what was going on at the time, and him and his army came back after several months to find like a small city starting to grow. And he said, Alyssa, you said this is just a small bit of the land. This is just an ox hide. Where that went? And one of Alyssa's companions said, well, what we did is maybe we cut that ox hide into fine strips and connected them in a semicircle to the shore, and that created a bigger land. King Ayarbas wasn't happy, but they offered him more and more money, so he left peacefully and left them. And Alyssa and her companions called that new city Carthage, which is in Phoenician, it means new city. That was in 814 BC, before Christ. By then, the Phoenicians had already established ports and colonies in many countries, many lands around the Mediterranean, in Greece, in Italy, even in other places in North Africa. They had been trading and sailing in this area through the Mediterranean and beyond the Mediterranean for more than 2,000 years earlier. In fact, they taught these people who met and who did trading with, they taught them the abstract alphabet. It was easier for them to do trade, to have abstract language than having to draw like the Egyptian did. If you say a bird, you have to draw a bird, whereas the language we speak is just letters you connected. And in fact, the English letter we write was originated from these Phoenician letters, the alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet. So bit by bit, Carthage prospered because of all these established relationships and because of the leadership and entrepreneurship of Alyssa. At a certain stage, this success and the growth in wealth and architecture and buildings and trading, that reached to King Ayarbas. He heard about what's going on and he wanted either a piece of it or to get hold of it all. So he contacted Alyssa, and Alyssa said, okay, let's do some competitions and let's compete with sports. We don't want to create a war. We don't have soldiers here. We just want to compete with sports. And they set their arena, which they had built in Carthage, and they started to compete with the tribes that followed the barbarian king Ayarbas. And the Carthaginians were winning. And at a certain stage, Alyssa said, okay, we have athletes run to meet each other from your tribes and from Carthage, and whatever they need, that will be our new frontier, our new land. And Ayarbas agreed. But he said, okay, Alyssa, whomever runs this race, they have to be buried alive, whatever they meet. And I agree to keep that land for you. And they did, and the athletes agreed. And they were buried alive, making Carthage even a bigger land. King Ayarbas couldn't take the defeat. So he demanded to either marry Alyssa or make a war against Carthage. Now, Alyssa understood that even if she would have to marry King Airbus, she will lose control over Carthage, and her people won't live the same freedom they had. But at the same time, she didn't want to make any destructions or wars for her city and her people. So she met with King Ayarbas and said, okay, I agree to marry you, but you have to sign a treaty to say and to just make sure that you no longer will cause any harm or invade Carthage. Just keep it a peaceful place. And Ayarbas agreed, said, okay, we'll do this. And Alyssa asked that before her wedding ceremony, that she would make a ceremonial funeral for her late husband, Asharbas. It would be like a bonfire, a pyre to honor her late husband before she would marry Ayarbas. And that was agreed, and the ceremony was prepared. And on the day when that fire was there with all the weapons and swords and everything preparing for the big ceremony, Alyssa ascended the pyre and declared that she now will be the wife of King Ayarbas, then took her sword and slew herself. After her self-sacrifice, Ayarbas ordered his barbarian army to defeat back to their land, leaving Carthage a safe and free place. Alyssa was deified and worshipped from then till modern age in Tunisia. The women of Carthage in Tunisia wanted to be the new Alyssa, and that became at that time the land place for Hannibal, who conquered the Romans in 2018 and occupied the south of Italy for 15 years until 146 BC, when the Romans won and took over Carthage. And that lasted till the 7th century AD, after Christ, where the country became the new Tunisia we know today. And this was the legend of Queen Alyssa, the Phoenician queen of Carthage.
Thank you, Hiba. That was a wonderful, wonderful story of an outstanding woman. And thank you for taking us on that journey through the Mediterranean and through North Africa. Thank you so much for that great historical journey.
Thank
Now,
you.
our last storyteller, last but not least, is Marilyn McPhee. Marilyn has told stories in the US, Canada, England, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Denmark, Portugal, and in her living room on Zoom. Her ancestors include people who have made buttons, forks, umbrellas, ships, and according to the courts in Salem, Massachusetts, spells. Marilyn is a board member of SAC and is also a member of the Storytelling Swap Group in San Diego. Marilyn.
Thanks, Ben. I am not actually a board member of SAC, but I love SAC and I love hanging out with their board meetings and finding out all the fabulous things they're doing. And SAC really does do some fabulous things. This is an example of that. She was a woman of mystery. No one really knew where she came from. They didn't know who her people were, her father, her mother. They didn't know how old she was. Some guessed 20, some 40, maybe older than that. They didn't even know her name. But there were some things that everybody knew, or at least thought they knew. They knew that she was beautiful. She moved with the grace of a dancer or a cat or a deer. Her eyes were dark and bright. Her lips were full and red. Her smile lit up everybody that she looked upon. Her hair, wavy and white as snow, framed her face like a halo. She was beautiful. And the other thing that everybody knew about her, or at least thought they knew, was that she was a witch. How did they know that? Well, some people said that she'd been seen on one side of the village and on the other side of the village at the same time. Some people said that they'd seen sparks come out of her dark eyes. And then, of course, there were the spells. Oh, nothing malicious, nothing harmful, but still spells, healing spells, love spells. People would come to her for what she could do for them. A mother might come for an herb that would cure a sick child. A young man would come for a potion or a poem that would convince a young woman to marry him. Sometimes people came for advice on settling disputes and bringing peace to their family or to their neighborhood. And everyone who came to La Bruja, for that is what they called her, everyone who came to her went away with a healing word or a healing herb, and they all went away satisfied. Well, perhaps not all. Every now and again, someone would come to her seeking vengeance or destruction, and she would wave them away and say, I cannot help you with that. You will have to seek elsewhere for that. She was powerful. Everyone knew that. And in the end, that was what caused the trouble. Because in that place and in that time, there was one man who considered himself the most powerful man in the area. He was the Spanish viceroy, and his name was Don Miguel. He was not a kind man, but a man who was known for a quick temper and for ruthless retaliation against anyone who crossed him. He controlled everything and everyone except for La Bruja, and this ate at him. He could not stand that he could not control her. Well, one day, something happened. Who knows? It could have been just a succession of small things, or it could have been just one big thing, but everyone in the area knew about the most recent embarrassment. There was a man, a merchant, whose horse had become suddenly lame, and he went to his neighbor, who was a farmer, and borrowed his horse because he needed to take some goods to market. The neighbor loaned his horse, and the merchant went to market. He had a very successful day of selling, and when the day was over, he went back to where he'd left the cart and the farmer's horse, and he found that underneath his cart, there was a foal. He went back and he gave the horse back to the farmer, and the farmer said, oh, I see that while you had my horse, that it gave birth to a foal. Where's the foal? But the merchant said, oh, I did find a foal underneath my cart, so it is my foal. Well, the farmer took the matter to the magistrate, the viceroy, Don Miguel. He explained what had happened and asked for justice. And who knows, perhaps Don Miguel was just distracted, or maybe, more likely, he'd been bribed. But in the end, after hearing all of the evidence, he said, The foal was found under the merchant's cart, so it belongs to the merchant. That is my decision. Well, having received no justice from Don Miguel, the farmer went to La Bruja. Can you help me? He said. Well, I can tell you how you can help yourself, she said. So the next morning, in the path that led between the residence of Don Miguel and the government palace where he had his office, well, there was the farmer, and he was holding in his hand a fishing rod. When Don Miguel rode by, he stopped, he looked at the farmer and he said, "What are you doing?" The farmer said, "Well, can't you see I'm fishing? I'm hoping to catch a big fish for tonight's dinner." Well, Don Miguel, he laughed derisively and he said, "You are a fool. Everyone knows that you can't catch a fish in the middle of a dusty road." "Well, perhaps not," said the farmer, "but stranger things have happened. Why, just the other day, your decision was that a cart had given birth to a foal." Well, Don Miguel's face turned beet red. Of course, he never would have mentioned that to anyone, but a couple of passing milkmaids witnessed the whole encounter, and soon the story was all over the village. Everyone was laughing at Don Miguel. It was surely no coincidence that only 2 days later, authorities came to the house of La Bruja, arrested her, and took her to a dungeon cell underneath the government palace. Don Miguel did not visit right away. He told one of his associates, "I'm just going to let her stay there for several days. When she sees the conditions that she is going to be in that dungeon, her proud spirit will be broken." But after a week, he did go to visit La Bruja. He came into the dungeon cell and he saw her. She was standing on a stool with a piece of charcoal in her hand, and she was drawing on the stone wall of the dungeon cell. What she was drawing was a picture of a ship, a sailing ship. When Don Miguel saw her, he said, "And how are you enjoying our accommodations, Bruja? Perhaps you wish to be freed, and that is possible. All you must do is admit that you are a witch and take your punishment and promise to never interfere with any of my decisions again." "That I cannot do," she said. Don Miguel took one step forward. He said, "Well, there may be one other way. If you were to somehow become a member of my household." And he reached out his hand to touch her cheek, but she pushed it away. She said, "Never. I would rather die in this dungeon." "And that you surely will do," said Don Miguel. And he turned to leave. But she said, "Wait, I must ask you a question. You are a man who is familiar with ships and sailing. Look at my drawing. Is it accurate? Is there any mistake that I've made? A plank, a rope, a knot, anything that I must correct?" He looked at the drawing. "No," he said, "it's perfect. It's only unfortunate for you that it is just a drawing." Now, who knows how such things happen? One moment she was standing on the stone floor of the dungeon, and the next moment she was standing on the deck of a ship, the ship that she had drawn on the wall. She put her hand to the tiller, and a breeze came up and filled the sails, and the ship began to move down the wall of the dungeon. When it came to the opposing wall, it kept on moving. La Bruja waved her hand to say goodbye to Don Miguel, and the ship was gone with La Bruja. A couple of hours later, Don Miguel's associates came down to see what had happened to him, and they found him seated on the stone floor of the dungeon cell with a wild look in his eyes. They asked him what had happened, and he told a crazy story about a ship that had been drawn on the wall but sailed out of the dungeon and took La Bruja with it. In the days that followed, he told the story again and again. becoming more and more agitated. And finally, he went completely mad. He was relieved of his position as viceroy, and he was sent back to Spain in the hold of a ship, restrained so that he could do no harm to himself or anyone else. And in that village, no one ever heard of Don Miguel ever again. And actually, no one ever saw La Bruja again either. Although from time to time, they would hear stories from a village 30 miles to the north or 20 miles to the west, stories of a mysterious woman, beautiful, with hair as white as snow that surrounded her face like a halo. A woman who, with a healing word or a healing touch or a healing herb, could bring peace and love and good fortune to anyone who came to see her. And that is a story from Mexico called La Bruja de Córdoba.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. What a great way to round out this wonderful evening of stories, urban and historical. Wonderful. La Bruja, strong, strong woman. Okay, so we'd like to bring our storytellers out in the order that they presented and have them tell us a little something very briefly about their next gig and any projects that they have coming up in the near future. Let's start with Tim. Tim, what are you up to after you leave this performance tonight? Unplug.
There, I'm unmuted.
There you
go. I'm doing lots of Zoom storytelling and an occasional live storytelling performance. What I'm most involved in right now is I'm finishing the third book in the How I Became a Ghost series. It's a Trail of Tears series narrated by a 10-year-old boy who becomes a ghost in the first book and narrates the entire series. And it's the book I'm working on now connects the Trail of Tears to the Irish famine through the ghost world of time traveling. And I'll actually be spending a couple of weeks in Ireland in November. I'll be there for my birthday, telling stories all over Ireland. I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh,
So that's kind of what I'm involved with right now, writing and storytelling.
Sounds like you're involved in a lot. So thank you for joining us tonight from Texas. Look forward to having you back again with us soon.
I'd love it. Thank you.
Okay, Leanne, what are you up to?
So tomorrow night, we've got a live storytelling at the Twisted Horn Mead Hall. If you happen to be anywhere near Vista down by San Diego in California, we'll be telling stories of mothers and others, and that'll be lots of fun. Also, I'll be starting teaching that class that Ben so nicely mentioned through Miracosta College. It's a live stream online class starting July 11th, and I'll put the link in the chat. So if anybody's interested in that, it's all online. And so anybody anywhere can take it.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. Mike.
Hi, hello. Yes, I'm mainly telling on Zoom meetings for various storytelling guilds. At this time, I'm taking some of the stories similar to the one that I told this evening, stories that I learned as a child that really as I researched them, I'm finding out that many of these do not seem to be written down or cataloged anywhere. Many of them are stories that I look at tortoiseshell carvings, wood carvings, memories from childhood to begin fleshing out some of these stories and trying to preserve them. I'm available to tell at different events. So if you'd like me to be involved in your projects, please give a call. Look forward to meeting a lot of you in person.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. Great having you. Alicia.
Hi, let's see. Well, the story that I told you is actually a part of a like really a 45-minute program where I bring out replicas and artifacts, and I left out a whole lot of characters, trying to stay within the 10 minutes. So I'm working on that. I too am zooming stories, and I'm very excited and pleased to share that I'm telling at the Sierra Storytelling Festival, July 8th and 9th. And that's my big wahoo.
Yep, that's a big
Oh,
one.
one more thing is I just finished my website, and I'm going to put it on. If any of you would like to check it out, it's my soft opening. I hold you all as being friends, and just check it out if it's working and it's not working before I start sending it out to schools and making myself available for events and that sort of thing. So I'll put it in the chat. Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Dave.
Oh, my next performance is going to be for the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. It's a week from this Saturday, the fourth Saturday of the month. And it starts at 2:00. It's on, or I'm going to be online. They're actually doing it live, but it will be streamed. So check it out. They have a website, and actually the theme is The Path Taken. And I'm actually going to tell a first-person story about my mental health career, which I don't usually do. But anyways, that's all I got going on right now.
Okay, sounds like a lot on your plate. Okay, Hiba.
No plans, specific plans for now, just my work and family commitments. But I'm honored to be here with you tonight, wonderful storytellers, and I got motivated. Thank you for the inspiration. And Alicia finished her website. Congratulations. I need to work on mine. So yeah, I need to set a plan, but it's not complete yet.
Great.
Thank you all.
And that's one thing that's so great about this group. We can all motivate one another.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
inspire. Okay, Marilyn.
There is no lack of exciting stuff going on in the storytelling world, is there? And some of the things that I'm participating in, besides just zooming everywhere and soaking up as many stories as I can from everywhere and everyone, our story swap with Storytellers of San Diego is next Wednesday at 3 p.m. And any of you are welcome to come and share a story. It's usually a very small, very friendly group. So welcome you to that. Then coming up also, I'm participating in the Sam Hinton Folk Festival in Poway, California. That's live on June 4th. And then online on the assist the wonderful program of Paul Laurence Dunbar poetry. I'm going to be telling reciting a poem that my grandmother used to recite from the days of her studies of elocution, which is exciting. And one of the other things that's coming up that I dearly love is on June the 24th, our storytelling group is kicking off the San Diego Highland Games with Tales and Legends of Scotland. And that is in Vista in northern San Diego County. And it's going to be lots of fun. Ooh, who knows, there's definitely going to be a fiddle and a harp and Aunt Leanne and some other really good storytellers. And who knows if a bagpipe might show up. So join us for that as well. There are lots of good things coming up. And if you would like to see what is happening in San Diego, you can check our website, which is www.storytellersofsandiego.org. And then you can go to our YouTube channel and see so many stories from me and from Leanne and from a lot of the other tellers in our area. Thank you so much for including me in this wonderful program.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And boy, I'll have to tune into that Paul Laurence Dunbar program. One of my favorite all-time poets. Great. Well, tonight's program will be posted on the YouTube channel for SAC in the next couple of days. So you can go there if you'd like to review that, share it with friends, and also make sure that you check out the SAC website for future programs and events that we host. And if you're not a member of SAC, please join and take advantage of all of the benefits like tonight's program is totally free to all SAC members. So thank you for joining us and keep those stories flowing. We need them now more than ever. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Good night.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
Go
Take care.
Warriors.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Marilyn, before we take off, I was born and raised in San Diego.
Ah, well,
Yeah.
come on back.
Oh, and Leanne too. Yeah. So, and I have a poem that I wrote as a tribute to my mother, who was also born 1921 in San Diego. And so I'd love to tell it for your group sometime.
Come tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. Well, what time?
I'm sorry, not tomorrow. Next week, I meant, right?
Okay.
Ah.
Yeah. Tomorrow night I'm with the Doc more, but
The swamp is
I'll-
Wednesday, but yeah,
Next-
email me and we can talk.
okay, cool.
mmcphee@gmail. Whoa. Yeah, in fact, love to connect with any of you. Come to San Diego in person or even virtually. We would love to have you join with us. Sarah has done that before on Zoom. Yeah, so
Yeah, we like having Sarah.
we do. We've got friends.
Fabulous. Well, thanks everyone. This was fantastic. See you
Thanks,
next time.
Andrew.
Sarah,
Yeah,
you're on
thank you,
mute.
Ben.
Were you
Thank
trying
you,
to say
Ben.
something?
Stories were great. Now, see you guys next time.
Alicia,
Thanks, Dave.
how is your hand?
It's coming along slowly. It's I've had a lot of nerve pain on this one. I didn't have any. Same operation. This was fabulous. This one has been just filled with a lot of nerve pain, but
Oh, sorry.
it's coming along slowly. Cast comes off this Friday, then it goes into a big fat soft cast, I think for like another month. I'm going to totally have to rehabilitate even my fingers, even though they're not attached to the thumb area, they're impact. So it's, I got my work cut out for me.
Oh,
But
well, good luck.
it's coming along, and I have friends that are waiting on me hand and foot. So
Awesome.
I'm grateful.
Nice. Nice. Hopefully it'll
Thanks
be
for
off by
asking.
July.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the plan. That's why I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, all this was unexpected. I'm supposed to have both hands so I can drive there, let alone tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
I'll get there.
Okay.
Thanks, Andrew. Great job. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good job. Good job.
Absolutely.
Good night, all.
Okay, folks, I'll see you
Bye,
later.
Mike.
I'll
Bye,
sign
Sarah.
off.
Thank you.
Toodaloo.
Unless somebody wants to say anything else.
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.